Hello to you all and welcome to this very special show that we've got today with an incredible guest, a very special guest, someone that many of you have probably watched for many years, including myself. But welcome to James Cooper. How are you doing, James? You okay, mate?
Hey, Callum. Yeah, thank you for inviting me to do this. This is fun. This is good. I just wish we had kind of more positive things to talk about from a Manchester United perspective. But it's always interesting, and there is no club like it on the planet.
You can certainly say that again. Annoyingly, I've always wanted to interview you and always just chat football in general with you. The frustrating thing for me, I suppose, is like you say, it's quite annoying that we have to speak about almost such a negative season. I suppose I always try and be as positive as possible when it comes to United, but they really test you sometimes, I think, and it has been a bit of a tough season. What have you made of this past 10 months?
Yeah, I think it's incredible. I think, as I said, there's no club quite like United in terms of highs and lows. There's no middle ground. You're either triumphant or it's a disaster. And I think this season has seen that. When you think about the 14 home defeats, you think about finishing 8th in the Premier League. You think of all these things and nothing seems certain. And I think, when people look at Manchester United, I think the problem about it is there's so much that's on fire at the moment. I don't mean on fire in a positive way. I mean it completely negative. And I think, one of the things that the INEOS have got to do, or the new owners, if you like, is work out which fire to put out first. And when you've got so much stuff that's on a blaze, that becomes a potential problem, and certainly one that soaks up cash wherever you look.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the thing is with INEOS as well, it's kind of such a fresh start that at the moment they almost can't do any wrong. But I think they are under a lot of pressure, aren't they? And I think that's probably one of the reasons. I know we'll come on to Ten Hag in a second, but do you think that's possibly a reason as to why they are not dilly-dallying, but almost hesitating or delaying a decision on Ten Hag's future because they're so adamant on not getting it wrong, and I think they're a bit worried of sacking him effectively?
I think you're right. I think there's a fear of making the wrong decision rather than a confidence in making a brave decision. I think the problem with it, we saw all the stuff just ahead of the cup final talking about whatever happens, he's done. Well, that performance, I think, a set of players, if they weren't playing for the manager, they were certainly playing for the shirt of the football club. There was certainly some fire in their bellies. I think they were lucky in the sense that they came across a Manchester City team that had been enjoying themselves after 4 times. And I don't think enough has been said about that. I think that Manchester City went into that game slightly blinkered, slightly thinking that even after a week of partying, they could go and beat Manchester United. And I think United put that to bed very, very nicely and came up with a performance I didn't expect. But then again, City didn't do a great deal with it. They had tons of the ball in those 2/3, and then the final third really had very little they could do against Manchester United. I think it was a fascinating game and one that made this decision that you're talking about with INEOS far more difficult, I think, than they would have expected prior to kickoff.
I think as well with City, I think you got that spot on really. In terms of, I remember seeing the pictures and the videos of certain City players after the league win, and they were quite worse for wear, to say the least. And I do wonder if, I remember it happening and I thought, I wonder if that'll sort of trickle over to the final. Do you think City probably just underestimated us and thought, oh, the game's won anyway, and it kind of allowed United to really grow into themselves and actually?
Yeah, I think there's an argument for that. I don't know about you, but I sat there at halftime thinking, wow, City can't be that bad again. Pep will change things around. Pep will have them on the front foot, and that never happened. There was never any energy in what they were trying to do. And Manchester United kind of stuck to their task. I expected Pep to look at what they've done and think, right, that's how we get our heads around this problem. That's how we tackle McTominay and Bruno playing in positions that maybe we didn't expect. I mean, we're talking about perhaps the greatest coach since Sir Alex Ferguson in the Premier League and experience. And yet, for some reason, he didn't get to grips with it. Now, whether that was if he didn't fancy it or whether the players were, as I say, not at their best, he says in inverted commas. It was odd, but it kind of played into everything. And maybe it's a master plan from Manchester City to keep Erik Ten Hag in the job at Manchester United, make sure that United aren't a threat in Manchester.
I mean, the weird thing for me is as well, I remember watching, I watched a game just in a local pub. Unfortunately, I couldn't go to Wembley, but I actually thought United, and I know obviously we've had injuries, and I know, your first 11 effectively returning is always going to make a difference, but I actually thought it was the best United had played all season. And as much as City were probably a little bit worse for wear, I thought United were were very good, to be honest. I don't know if it was a case of was City terrible or were United good. I think it's probably a bit of both. And you know, I think it says a lot. You know, with 2 academy graduates scoring, it's always a little bit of a fairy tale. And I thought Onana was actually probably at fault for that goal. I think he could have definitely done better. But really, I think the 2-1 scoreline probably suggested better for City. I thought United probably could have scored more and kept the clean sheet as well.
Yeah, I think it was a really important point that was made by a lot. They were talking about performance being fine for Wembley and winning an FA Cup, but not being fine for playing at home at Old Trafford. I don't know whether you see that or not. I mean, there's a style of manager what Manchester United do, excuse me. You know, and we hear about DNA, we hear about the fabric of the football club that's rolled out time and time again. But you want entertaining football, you want front foot football. I don't think necessarily that FA Cup final wasn't front foot football, because I thought they played on the counter-attack really well and there was a danger to what they were trying to do. But I'm not sure Manchester United fans would take that from home performances. And
yeah, I think that's probably still a lot of his concern, though, isn't it? And moving on to Ten Hag, with the sort of worry around his future and the concerns around his future, do you think the ability to not be able to play a particular style of play is probably something that's hindering his job and the future of his job as well? Oh. Right, we're back. I think we lost James for a second there. I think his connection went, but we are back. Obviously, I think we were just speaking about Ten Hag, and obviously, I know the game against City played very well, but ultimately, I think the lack of style of play or lack of ability to be able to implement a style of play over nearly 2 years of being in charge is probably one of his biggest negatives against his name. Do you think him not being able to do that is probably a big reason why so many fans and potentially the most important people, but INEOS, are wanting to potentially make that change?
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point. I think, as I said, people expect Manchester United to play in a certain way and to have some sort of style of play. Basically, you know, when you look at other teams in the Premier League that are being successful and doing things and making life more difficult for Manchester United, you think of teams like Brighton, Crystal Palace even, you know, of late, they've got styles of play. And we're not talking about teams that are exceptional, that have the same expectations as Manchester United. And yet, you know, we look at the recruitment, you look at the money spent, and you can't say how United play from week to week. You can't say this is front foot football, or this is counter-attacking football, or this is sitting deep, or this is the low. You know, all of those sort of things happen in different moments. But I think, you know, I don't think Erik Ten Hag is the only manager of Manchester United since Sir Alex Ferguson that's been guilty of this. But I think there's a reliance on your key players to come up with moments that rescue a team. And sometimes that doesn't happen. And you've seen some of the defeats where it hasn't happened. And sometimes it does. You know, sometimes like a cup final, you know, you get a pass from Bruno Fernandes to Mainu, which was incredible. And that pass out to the right-hand side in the build-up to that goal. And amazing moments from amazing players. But you can't rely on them to do that all the time. You've got to have some sort of... Yeah, it's just weird. But as I said, I don't think Erik Ten Hag is the only person that's guilty of that. But I think you would have wanted to see more progress over 2 seasons. And that's probably the dilemma that's kind of exercising the minds of INEOS.
It's weird for me because I'm still... I never like to call for the manager's head, and I'm still so undecided. I mean, I was on Stretford Paddock the other week, and I sat with Dave Scott, and he is very much of the ilk that I think it's a case of he needs to go now. And it was after the Coventry game when we were 3-0 up, and it ended up being 3-3 going through on penalties. So maybe it was a reaction or slightly too reactive, but that was kind of the game where I officially went, maybe a change is needed. But then you think of the potential options and, you know, replacements, and then we go and win the FA Cup. And it's one day I'm like, yeah, he needs to go. And then the next day I'm like, well, I don't think he should go. Maybe he should. Maybe he does deserve the season with a proper structure above him. So it's some of his interviews do make it hard for him to be defended, though. I think.
God, you know, do they ever?
About the finances on players, it's like, you know, you recommend these players, and I get the club do these negotiations, but I'd argue particular players he signed, they're not naming any names, wouldn't be worth £1. Never mind over 80 million, let's say.
No, you're right. I tell you what, if Anthony's sitting there at 80 million, you and I are worth 10 apiece.
Yeah,
and that's without taking part in a training session with Manchester United either. But I don't want to keep throwing questions back on you because you're talking to me. But do you believe in him as a Manchester United manager? I don't mean from a tactical point of view and a football point of view, but I look at someone there who chooses the wrong suits, the wrong shirts, the wrong things to say.
Yeah,
and I've worked with some amazing characters who've been Manchester United managers, the likes of Louis van Gaal, the likes of Jose Mourinho, who, again, putting the football to one side, were characters who understood what the role brought to it. And of course, Sir Alex Ferguson, at the very top of that pyramid, he understood the kind of showbiz of it. He understood how to command a room, and the fact that as Manchester United manager, you've got to have a voice, you've got to have gravitas. And it isn't a Dutch thing, because we've seen Van Gaal passionately be a Manchester United manager. I just don't understand why Erik ten Hag doesn't get it, that there's certain buzzwords and phrases that need to come out of a Manchester United manager's mouth that just don't seem to.
Yeah, it's such a good question, that, isn't it? Because if you'd have asked me 12 months ago after winning the Carabao Cup, which, as someone who's always been quite outspoken about that competition, I'm not that fussed for it. It's great to win it, and it's a good day out, and it's always a celebration. But I know there's other countries across Europe that don't even have that second cup competition to exist. I know it's a trophy that the so-called lesser, no disrespect for them, but the lesser teams can potentially win them. But I think over recent years it always tends to be the big clubs that win it anyway. And I think with the calendar and stuff at the minute, and especially with the FA Cup replays being scrapped, I think there was certainly other games and other competitions first that could have been scrapped before that. So it's not something that I'm not happy with. But first season, getting rid of the trophy drought, the small trophy drought that we had, and then finishing third. If you'd have asked me that 12 months ago, I'd have been like, do you know what? He's clearly made that little bit of progress. I think I do believe in him. Maybe he just hasn't got that charisma, but it doesn't matter as long as results are happening on the pitch. And then this season, it's just been so unbelievably different. And as much as I say about the injuries, you alluded to it before, but the likes of Brighton and Crystal Palace and, a lot of teams this season have had a lot of injuries. And whether that is because of the calendar or not, I don't know. But, it certainly adds up. And Crystal Palace are probably one of the biggest ones. They've had quite a few injuries, and Glasner's come in and absolutely transformed them from Hodgson to himself. And the football that they play is excellent. And it's a case of, you shouldn't just need a first 11 to play your style of football. The whole team and the whole squad should be able to do that. And when he comes out and says, we've had loads of injuries, yeah, I get that. But your squad should be able to play what you want them to play like, albeit maybe not the same quality, but they should still have the same ideas. And I think when I've seen the likes of Jamie Carragher really well analyse Kobe Mainoo, for example, who doesn't know whether he's coming or going sometimes, it just makes me think, they're the reasons that make me go, I don't know if I can continue to defend him. And then he comes out with his interviews and blames other things. And I'm just like, you are making it really hard. And I do think the reaction and the nostalgia of winning the FA Cup is starting to now wear off. And I do wonder if people are starting to look at it with a level head again and go, do you know what, maybe somebody else should come in. And I don't think it'd be any mean feat if INEOS did say, look, we're going to, because maybe they just want their own man. Maybe there's a particular structure and a particular way that they want United to play like, and Ten Hag doesn't fit that. And that's okay. That's nothing on Ten Hag. It doesn't mean you're a bad coach. It doesn't mean you're a bad manager. It just means you don't fit what this new ownership wants. So I'm so undecided, because I never want to be the person that calls for the manager's head. But I think I am. I think it depends on who we get. Because if you were to say someone like Gareth Southgate, my God, I'd rather put myself in charge. But if it was maybe a Tuchel or, I don't know. This is what I mean. The candidates are so, the shortlist is so underwhelming, let's say. It's tough to give a solid answer whether it's a get rid or keep, to be honest.
No, I know exactly what you mean. And I think, from a very, very biased point of view, I'm an Ipswich Town fan, so I was delighted that Kieran McKenna is staying at Portman Road and wasn't coming to Manchester United. So that was my one fear, that they decide to get rid of Ten Hag and suddenly McKenna's there, and our dream of being a Premier League staple, or at least staying more than a season in the Premier League, something crashes and burns. But the only thing I will temper, and I'm not trying to defend Ten Hag here, is that maybe we saw in the evidence of the FA Cup final actually work from the training field. And again, that's one of the things that's kind of left me perplexed over the last couple of years. I've kind of asked myself, what on earth are they doing on the training field every week at Carrington? Because it's not borne out in the performances. And yet this time round, it seemed to be.
I mean, it's certainly that's the frustration for me though, because I remember sat there watching the game and I thought, you know what, we're playing very well, and there was almost an element of I was very happy we were playing well, and I was obviously happy that we won the trophy, but there was an element of frustration as well, because it just made me think, how have they not played like this more often? And the solid excuse is the injuries, I get that, but to not even show a sign of the way they want to play is my biggest concern from it. And I think, like I say, I think you'd like to see a bit more progression by now. And I know there's 2 trophies, but I know Solskjaer said it the other year in terms of it can sometimes hide where you actually are within a process, I suppose, if you do win a trophy, because you can win a cup, you can go on an amazing cup run. You see it in the lower leagues, Newport County go on runs and things like that. So it can happen. I think if INEOS are to judge Ten Hag on the FA Cup and the FA Cup alone, I don't think we're in for as good as a ride as we're hoping.
No, I think you're right. And I think the one thing that they're looking at is a structure that has a manager who's a head coach, not a manager. I think that's one of the things that's going to count against him. I think, they want to assemble a recruitment team who does that. And to be honest, if I was Erik ten Hag right now, I'd say after the way you've gone about the transfer market in the last couple of years, I'd say let someone else do it. If that means me keeping my job, I'm not be proud about it. I want to be a Manchester United manager. And I think that's probably the sort of conversation that's going on right now. I think INEOS are determined that whether it's Jason Wilcox, whether it's Dan Ashworth, they've got a team of people there who are going to sort the recruitment, and they want a manager or a head coach, who's going to do the things that we've been talking about, work with a team on a pitch, come up with a fabric, a style of play, and hopefully take Manchester United on. But I think the key problem is with what INEOS are doing and where Manchester United are right now. No one wants to use one word, and that's patience. Manchester United fans don't want to hear it, and I don't think INEOS are brave enough to do it. If it was me, I'd say, hang on a moment, let's give this 5 years. Yeah, I think that's where we're at.
That's the major issue, though, isn't it? I don't think, as much as fans say we need a rebuild, and we know we need a rebuild, nobody truly wants to wait and see the remnants of a rebuild happening, because football's about the here and now, and you want to celebrate wins now. And I think sometimes you have to take the rubbishness now to see the rewards in a few years. And I don't think fans, particularly us United fans, we've probably just not got patience for that. No, I don't think they truly believe the word rebuild. I think it's just a bit of a hearsay word for so many fans, but they're not willing to wait for the rebuild to come to fruition. And I think that's probably an issue within the fan base as well. I mean, from your perspective, do you think Ten Hag goes?
It's a really, really interesting one. I think from where I'm standing, in my opinion, is I would want someone who fulfills all the criteria I've been talking about from a Manchester United manager. So, a Tuchel does that, maybe a Pochettino does that, maybe a De Zerbi does that. People who understand what they're part of. And I think it's taken so long, 2 years, and I still don't look at that person in the dugout and think, wow, that's a Manchester United manager. He's living and breathing it. And I don't know why he doesn't say the right things. I don't know why he doesn't have the passion that I want him to have, albeit he's been booked 4 times as a manager this season for Manchester United. But it's just not right. And walking out of Old Trafford when it's raining and pouring in a brown suit, that said everything I needed to know about Erik ten Hag. All the decisions he's making just don't seem to be the decisions I'd expect from a Manchester United manager. And I said, I'm not a United fan, but I am passionate about how special your football club is, because I think it really is unique. And I think it needs people who understand that to put it back to where it belongs.
I think the level-headedness of it as well. And obviously, I know you covered United for so long, so you can understand the sort of how special the club can be, and sort of how daunting, I suppose, it can be in terms of a manager sometimes. And maybe some people just haven't. Some people just haven't got what it takes, I guess. And again, that's not an issue. I do question a lot of his decisions, and I question his answers a lot of the time in interviews. And I get he's probably just trying to defend himself or defend his players, but I think sometimes there is a case of, just give the fans that confidence that they're looking for. And I think you're right. He probably isn't doing that enough, especially after 2 years of being in charge as well. We'd like to have seen something a bit extra now.
I think so. I think the other thing is, you said there's an underwhelming sort of guest list in terms of other choices that United can make, but he's underwhelming as well. We're stuck in the vanillas at the moment rather than the blacks and the whites, and I think that's the problem. Whoever comes in has got a real difficult job, as I say, because I think there's so much there that needs to be changed. And I think INEOS have come.
I mean, sorry, just to interrupt there, Jays. Do you think it's more United though? Because playing devil's advocate slightly, Ten Hag 2 years ago was the next best thing. It was slightly just before that he was talked as potentially replacing Guardiola or being the natural replacement of Guardiola at City. Do you think United? I know the structure's been terrible for years and years, and he's not the only manager who has suffered from it. But do you think United just kind of ruin managers' careers almost? Do you think it's a major United problem that here we are yet again after 2 years of a manager that not long ago was the next best thing, doing so well with Ajax? Do you think United are probably at fault for a lot of the issues we're seeing with Ten Hag?
Yeah, I think you've got a good point there. I think it's not an easy club to work at, to play at, to manage at. I think there are challenges there, and I think without making Manchester United fans feel really good about themselves, I've said it's unique, it's special. I don't think it's easy looking round and seeing on one side of you the Sir Bobby Charlton stand, looking out in front from a dugout, and it's the Sir Alex Ferguson stand, and all the kind of stuff that comes with being at Manchester United and playing your games at Old Trafford. But I think therein lies the problem. You've got to have some substance, some belief, some character. And I know that Manchester United fans would not want to go back to Louis van Gaal football or Jose Mourinho football, but what they had in those two people were proper characters who understood what this club was about in different ways. Van Gaal was loved, and the reality is that Manchester United probably got him 10 years too late. Similarly, I think, Jose wasn't loved and made himself an isolated figure at Carrington and at Manchester United. But I think, again, there's an argument that maybe United got him 5 years too late as well.
Absolutely.
But both of these people stood there and you thought, yeah, there's a Manchester United manager. I might not like him, might not like what he's doing on the pitch, but he is a figurehead for my football club. And we haven't got a figurehead for Manchester United right now, I don't think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would be curious. I mean, the problem is, I don't think it's reason enough for a man to keep his job in terms of what the candidate list is like. I think you have to concentrate on yourself and do the best. And if you aren't, somebody else will give it a go. So the candidate list is obviously underwhelming, but like you say, so is he sometimes. So, but obviously, I knew that'd be the bulk of the interview, to be honest, about Ten Hag, just because of how much of it in the news he's been. But just wanted to move on from Ten Hag about somebody else that's been probably mainly criticised as well this season, to the point of some people online probably abuse him too much. But Marcus Rashford, what have you made of his season?
Wow, that's a really leading and difficult question to answer, in a sense that, as soon as you open your mouth on Marcus Rashford, then people just jump down your throats. So yeah. I'll be really careful. I think there's a very, very good footballer there, but it's for some reason it's hiding and only coming out in glimpses. And I think it's been a problem with kind of diminishing returns as far as he's concerned. Manchester United fans know that he can play, know how good he is. You have to step into the past and think about that penalty he took at PSG in the Champions League, and the balls he showed that night, tucking that away when he had to wait for ages, and some of his performances, which have been brilliant. But then all that evidence on one side, and then you look about what we've seen this season, and he looks like the shadow of the person and the player that you would want. I still would like to see Manchester United with him in the side, with him in the squad, but I think he's in the last chance saloon. I think, and it needs to be a season where he responds in a positive way, and maybe not going to the Euros and maybe coming off social media are all good things. I'm really reticent for Manchester United to start thinking one of our greatest academy products, perhaps, arguably, is not fit for us anymore. I think that's a really dangerous move, perhaps. But I can also see some, if you like, I can see the attraction of getting rid of him and bringing in a big transfer fee, which suddenly changes maybe the dynamic of the recruitment this summer, because I think that's the other thing that probably people aren't saying too loudly, is that Manchester United need to get rid of players, raise some cash if they're going to have any sort of restructure this summer. Otherwise, I think it's going to be sort of thin pickings.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair with Rashford, I mean, I love Rashford, and I think what he's done for United over however many years, and the goals he scored, but more off the pitch as well, what he's done for the communities and local communities in Manchester as well.
And we know that, living in Manchester as well. Yeah, exactly. That isn't just us just sort of waving a big Marcus Rashford flag. The guy's made a difference.
The guy's made such a
fair share and everything like that.
Yeah, and the thing is, I think a lot of the abuse he receives is from particular fans online who aren't local to Manchester, I suppose. And I think it's hard for them to connect with him for probably that reason. I think the abuse he receives is probably absolutely insane and ridiculous, to the point where it is very clearly too far. But I do think, and I do wonder, this is the first summer I've found myself thinking, wow, this is probably the first year we could genuinely lose Rashford. Because it was only the last game of the season when he was getting fans shout at him at Old Trafford. And with Mbappe leaving to Real Madrid, and I don't think Rashford's on Mbappe's level, personally. I think he's probably the rung or two rungs below. However, it's been very well noted that I think PSG are or have been interested in the past in Rashford. So with Mbappe going, I really could see a sizable bid come in for him. And I think with the stuff that's happened this season, with the abuse he's received, I think Rashford would potentially consider it as well. And United would consider it if a good offer would come in. Can you see him leaving this summer?
Yeah, I think there's a real chance. I think the way you've couched it there, I think, as I say, I think United will be looking at it thinking, wow, if a big offer comes in, that unlocks maybe possibilities in terms of replacements. I think you also, I think in Marcus's mind, I mean, I know how attached he is to being in Manchester where all his family are. That's a big thing, where he grown up and his heritage. But I think sometimes you look at it and think enough's enough. And you're right. Some of the stuff that gets thrown his way, bearing in mind what he's achieved and what he's done on and off the pitch, is absolutely ridiculous. And only testament to, again, Manchester United being, a fly in a lot of people's ointment. So, yeah, I could see it. And I think potentially it's a solution. But what I'd dearly love is for him to come out next season in a Manchester United shirt and prove people wrong. Because we're not talking about somebody who hasn't got that ability. We're just talking about somebody who's kind of lost their way a little bit. And I think, I have some ties with Larne Football Club in Northern Ireland. And, Larne Football Club never thought they'd be tied to Marcus Rashford. Suddenly you find him there with Roshan Williams. And the whole thing just became some sort of pantomime. and you can't be doing that being Marcus Rashford and being a Manchester United player. You can't. It's as simple as that.
He's certainly, I would say he's probably certainly not blameless. I think after the City defeat the other month, when he ended up being, I know it was his brother's birthday, but I think it's probably a little bit old school. But I think with stuff like that, you just keep yourself to yourself a little bit more. Yeah. You make better decisions. You keep yourself out of the media eye for that particular day, just because they'll jump on it. He's not necessarily done anything wrong, but you can understand why things were jumped on, especially given how he was playing and the City game as well. So I just don't think you're right. I don't think you make those easy mistakes. I don't think you give people a chance to have a go at you when you don't need to. And I think you get away with one or two early on in your career, perhaps, arguably. But bearing in mind how seasoned he is, bearing in mind of what he's achieved for Manchester United, you don't go and make those kind of rudimentary mistakes.
Yeah, absolutely. And give people a real go at you again.
Well, I know he's not been in the best of form, but would you have still took him to the Euros?
I think as an option, as someone who played across that front line, I think yes. But I think, it's interesting when you talked about Gareth Southgate perhaps being an option for Manchester United. I think we know that he has certain players that he trusts and he put a lot of faith in them, no matter how they're playing. And I think there's an issue there at the moment that probably he doesn't trust Marcus Rashford to do any of the things that he wants him to do, which I think is sad as well.
Yeah, well, I'm personally, and for me, it'll always be United over country, and I think it's probably the case for a lot of United fans, potentially a lot of club fans, to be fair. But one thing I would say is I understand why he's not gone, and I understand why he wasn't picked. But when you look at certain other players that have gone, probably the likes of Jack Grealish who have gone, I personally think I still think Rashford probably should have gone over him, just because he probably offers that little bit more. So I would be critical of Southgate there, but you can certainly understand. And as a United fan, it's probably quite refreshing knowing that he's about to have the next 3-4 months off. He can just chill out. He can do what he wants to do. He can go hang out with his friends. He can go to Miami and do his thing. And then he's had a proper break. Because I know he likes doing that. And, it's sometimes a criticism that people give of him. But, he's just living his normal life, I think. But I think the break will be really good for him. And I think,
I hope he doesn't go. I hope he is a Manchester United player next season, because I think there is a really good player in there.
I'd be absolutely. I would be shocked. I think PSG will chance their arm. I think they will. I think United will understand. It would take a lot for them to even consider it, though. I think you'd be talking 130 million plus for them to even consider it, and I don't think PSG would offer that. So, I think United will have Rashford next season, and I hope United have the Rashford that we know and love. It was only 12 months ago he was coming off the back of a 30-goal season, so it's not as if it was that long ago that he wasn't doing it for us. So, and the glimpses he's shown, like you say, the wonder goal against City, there's clearly a player there, and there's clearly just something stopping it from coming out, and I don't know what it is, and I think that's the concern.
And I think, Manchester United fans have opinions on everything, but you're not telling me that he's not a better option than Jadon Sancho or Anthony.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think those that are saying he isn't are just using maybe an agenda or just a quite clear blind sort of blinkered look at it, that anything different is better or anything new is better. And it's just not the case. I think you need to let that agenda move aside and go, do you know what? Clearly he is a good player and he's just not quite there for whatever reason. That's when you have to be careful and not go over the line of criticism and abuse and all that. But obviously we know that. But moving on from Rashford, obviously INEOS have come in. They've got some huge plans. One of the big things I wanted to ask you really is, obviously as a reporter who's covered United for so many years, one of the big things Sir Jim wants to do is something with the stadium, whether that be build a new one or redevelop the current one. What are your thoughts on the stadium and what do you think is best to do?
I think it's a really good question. First and foremost, I think the problem is that people come to Old Trafford and it's kind of look at the big old stadium that has loads of heritage and history, and then you go down the road to Manchester City and it feels like a day out. It feels like an event. I'm not saying either is right or wrong, but they seem to understand that we are in the sort of day and age where events are perhaps more important to some than actually the football match. And I think INEOS realised that. And I think, to be honest, the Glazers did a little bit. And I'm no defender of the Glazers, but I think when you look at what they do at Tampa Bay, again, it's an event. And I think that's where United are at. I would love to see Manchester United redevelop Old Trafford and keep it on the same footprint that it's at now. I think when it comes down to the people making that decision, who will be the architects, and probably more importantly, I think it's probably which is ever cheapest. Do you put a load of funds down a black hole that perhaps Old Trafford is, or do you think, right, we cut our losses, we forget about the railway line and all those sort of things that we talk about in terms of Manchester United and Old Trafford, and maybe we build in the car park and it's a new super stadium that gets people really excited and gets them maybe forgetting that things aren't what they should be on the pitch. Everyone likes a bright shiny button to look at, and it might be that's Manchester United's bright shiny button, but ideally hope that when you walk around the pitch at Old Trafford and you see the the stuff that people don't like, the camber on the pitch, or the fact that it tilts away from the goal at the corners. It's always blown my mind that.
Yeah, it's always blown my mind that from being a young kid.
It's incredible. It's a really, really special place. And as I say, I'm not a Manchester United fan, but you walk in there and you think, wow, this is something. And I know the counter argument is, why is the roof leaking? Why are the corporate facilities not as good as they are at other clubs, and all this sort of thing? Where's the atmosphere? And it has improved a little bit, but I think the long and short of it is whichever is cheaper will probably be the solution.
I actually think as much as the cheaper option is probably better, I think in the long term, I actually think I grew up next to the ground, literally 5-minute walk from it. And I was always of the impression, I always agreed with my friend Jay on this, but I was always of the essence that you can't leave Old Trafford. Absolutely not, right? And then when Sir Jim effectively touted plans to stay on the same site but build a new, because obviously I know United own so much land around there, I actually didn't realise how much we owned.
When that absolutely tons, yeah.
It's effectively that entire area is just filled with car parks and things. And I think probably similar to what Tottenham did, I imagine. But that's when my mind sort of changed and went, do you know what? With the roof leaking and with the facilities in the way they are, similar to probably Carrington as well, but with the facilities in such disarray almost because of the neglect of the Glazers. It's like you say, you mentioned Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay's their football club, American football club. But they haven't shown any kind of care like that to United or to the stadium. No. And I think over the past couple of years, or past few months in particular, when Sir Jim kind of went, look, we are thinking of this, I think some fans were nostalgic, and it's completely okay to be, by the way, but I think we may be looking at it with too much nostalgia. And I think with where United want to go and the size of Man United, would it be more sustainable to build that new stadium? Because I think the fixing and repairing of the current Old Trafford may be too far gone now.
Yeah, I think there's an argument that, and what I don't like is just seeing a fresh coat of paint every pre-season It's almost a metaphor for the club at the moment that, you just put a bit of paint on and everyone forgets that things aren't going wrong. So I can see that. And having been, to the Tottenham Stadium, I mean, it's like a spaceship's landed in North London. It's incredible. It really is the most fantastic place. So if Manchester United came up with something like that, I could see that. It would just leave me with a kind of heavy heart that you're effectively just sort of waving goodbye to some of the stuff that stadium has brought Manchester United fans, but not just that, has brought football. It's a big decision.
I think, to be honest, even as a United fan, I wouldn't want to be in the room with Seb Coe and Andy Burnham and Sir Jim and all the others, just because I find it such a difficult decision as a United fan. And I think there's going to be so many people who are annoyed with the decision, whether it be redevelop or a new stadium completely. I'd love to stay at Old Trafford. I just wonder if the place has just felt a bit too much at this point. You've got bits of concrete falling from the ceiling, the away team dressing room leaking, the roof leaking. It's embarrassing sometimes, and it's a stick to beat the club with from rival fans, and it's hard to defend. And I think rival fans know why it's happened. I think they just like to pretend that it's not that because it's funny to wind United fans up, I guess. But we're all guilty of it. But I think I do wonder when we'll find out and when the conclusion of the meetings will be. But it's a big thing, and I'd be very sad to see Old Trafford go. Put it that way.
Yeah, I would, and I think again it will come down to money. If they can get some cash from somewhere else to do whatever they want to do, then I think that will have a big say in what they decide to do as well. Because I think the problem is that whatever Manchester United decide to do as a football club across the board, across the whole club, is going to cost a lot of money. Whether that be the first team, whether it be Carrington, whether it be the stadium. There's all these things. The only thing that appears for me to be functioning in a way that you'd expect Manchester United to function is the academy. I think that's the one bright light. And I know the guys there. I know how hard they work. And I know the respect with which they do things and the understanding of what Manchester United's about. There just still seems to be a little bit of a disconnect between the academy and the first team structure, because I don't think you've got a manager there who really wants to take the risk on some of those younger players, having actually taken the risk on 2 or 3 of them, and that being repaid fantastically.
It's a really good point that actually with the manager going back to him, but the young players, as much as some have had opportunities, I do think more could have, and it is something that I think he was probably criticised about last season. We did very well last season, but the opportunities were probably a little bit short from what I imagine. Probably, I know a few got a chance, but I think fans would have liked to have seen more. So I completely get that. And I think the academy at Man United is always just going to be the number one thing that functions, just because it has for so many years. I mean, the record we've got of I think it's 1937 was the last time we didn't have an academy player in the first team squad, which is mental when you think about it. But it's such a credit to the club and how long and how far it goes back. So it's obviously a credit, and I think it's the only thing that will work forever, no matter how bad we are or how badly we run. So that's always nice to see. But I would say that the likes of Garnacho and Mainu coming in, it's been a shining light this season. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think so. I think Mainu in particular, and I think what probably both those players need is experience around them. I think when you're looking at Kobe Mainu, one of the priorities perhaps for this transfer window, if Casemiro's going to go, and I think that probably is inevitable, is bringing in someone who can explain to him what he needs to do and be chipping in on the pitch, left, right, and centre, and talking him through a game. I think he needs that. I think towards the end of the season, I think we saw some. It's going to sound really harsh, but I think we saw some bad habits there, where he kind of picked up the fact that other people weren't doing the things that maybe he found was part and parcel of being a Manchester United player, and thought, well, if they're not doing it and they're earning huge salaries and they're stars at Manchester United, then why do I have to do it? And I think that becomes a really difficult thing, because I think when do you unpick that problem? And I think right now, what Manchester United need to do in terms of their recruitment and their recruitment is due diligence. They need to find the right characters. They need to find the right people, because and I know there isn't an outstanding candidate to be captain there. Where are the leaders? Where are the people who stand up? Where are the people you look to? And Bruno stood up over this last season, and he would be the only person that I would want as captain of Manchester United right now. But I know still that most Manchester United fans wouldn't agree with me.
I find that bizarre, though. I find Bruno is such an obvious captain choice. I actually think, as much as I love them, I think Gary Neville and Roy Keane have been a little bit unfair to Bruno in some of the punditry. I think Bruno is head and shoulders the leader above the rest of them, and I'd be more than okay with him being captain. I think some of that questioning his captaincy is quite frustrating for me, because I think you can see how much he cares and how much he loves putting the shirt on. And I think you see that he's the one player, I think, over the last 2-3 years who you could say consistently has been okay. So I find it quite hard to hear when some former players do say that. But the former players are also right in the same respect that the dressing rooms they came into were so different. You know, when Roy Keane came in 94, he had 93, sorry, he had, you know, he likes Steve Bruce and Brian Robson there, and Gary Neville had the same. And, you know, even like when Rio came in, he had the Roy Keanes and Beckhams and all that, and Ryan Giggs is to look up to. Whereas you couldn't say the same now. You certainly couldn't say Kobe Mainoo and Garnacho were coming through. Who can they look up to? You know, I know you've got your Rashfords and your Brunos and stuff, but ultimately you can't say they're in the same breadth as the players that I mentioned before.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think also those dressing rooms were born out of a reflection of the manager and the person that was in charge. You know, Sir Alex Ferguson kind of, alongside David Gill, carefully crafted that to make sure that he had a dressing room of proper leaders. And I think what we're seeing now is maybe someone in charge of Manchester United, Erik ten Hag, who isn't a proper leader and probably perhaps doesn't understand what a proper leader is all about. Or maybe he doesn't want to be challenged. Maybe he's decided he wants a set of players that do what they're told.
I think there's so many questions around so many things at United at the minute, and I think that's the worry. And I think the Ten Hag question and answer needs sorting ASAP. And I think it's a little worrying that we're going into June now and we're still in the same question. And I'd like to have thought the review was going on at the end of the season. I think some of the performances at the end of the season alone probably warranted a change of manager. So I'm
hoping some of the recruitment decisions are being made, you know, regardless of what's going on.
Absolutely.
And that's the only faith I have, is that I think the people they've got there, namely Jason Wilcox at the moment, I think I would trust to make the right decisions on that.
Yeah, definitely. I'd agree with that. Just, well, in terms of United stuff, we'll sort of park it there. But I just wanted to ask you a couple of questions, really. Obviously, you covered United for so many years. What was your favourite moment covering the club?
I think it has to be the treble. I think, you know, just to be there at all those games, talking to the people that were involved in it. I think, you know, whether it be the Spurs game at the end of the season in the Premier League, or the Newcastle game at the FA Cup final at Wembley, when you realise that all roads were then leading to Barcelona, and then to be in that stadium was an absolute privilege. And then to do some of the last interviews with like Peter Schmeichel on that night before he left, you know, and just to see what that meant to so many people. I mean, it was a very different time. I was at the new camp and trying to find my way to the mix zone and took a wrong turn and didn't realise I was outside the Bayern Munich dressing room, and out stepped Carsten Janker in absolute tears. And that just wouldn't happen now. It shows you how things have changed since then, how I would never be allowed there, and he would never confront me. And I was whisked away fairly quickly after that. But
I can imagine.
But it was an amazing thing. And, you know, I worked with MUTV that season, and I think that was the most important decision I ever made. You know, my job was to speak to the manager, Sir Alex Ferguson, the players, and I built relationships with that football club, which stood me in great stead for the rest of my career. You know, that was just an amazing thing to be part of, that whole season, not just those 3 games, but just this feeling of a team that was absolutely going to tear teams from limb wherever you looked, and they were going to get to that finishing line, and they were going to do something special. You know, from Christmas onwards, you felt, wow, you know, I'm absolutely in the company of greatness here. And you know, I know, and I was really disappointed, and blimey, I'm sure Manchester United fans have got more choice words than that, but you know, I didn't want Manchester City to have that under their name. I didn't want them to have a treble. I wanted it to be special in 1999 because probably I'm selfish and I wanted to be involved in something that was unique.
Yeah, I certainly don't think it takes away the uniqueness, and not getting into it too much. I'm sure there's quite obvious controversy around City's trophies anyway. So we can always, just as a United fan, it probably makes us feel better to say that there's an asterisk against the name, I suppose. Whether that will remain, I don't know, but I'm sure we'll see in times gone by. But what did you watch the documentary, the 99 documentary on Amazon Prime? I
haven't as yet. I've watched loads of stuff. I haven't had time to do that as yet, and there's part of me in my life where I watch a lot of football, and sometimes making an argument on an evening to watch more football isn't the most powerful thing in the world. So I think one of the things I want to do over this summer is spend some time kind of wallowing a little bit, and I'm looking forward to doing that.
Yeah, it was quite upsetting in a way watching it and just knowing how good we used to be. It gave you goosebumps watching
Wow,
it.
it was just a phenomenon.
It was
You know,
just
two
incredible.
players for every position, and it didn't matter who stepped into that position. Everyone knew their jobs and they knew what they were doing, and they were held to account by the people around them.
The sheer trust that from the manager and within the team as well was probably so helpful towards the cause of going on to win what they did. But the sheer goosebumps. I watched it. I just watched it one evening, and I said to myself, "I'll watch one tonight. I'll watch another one tomorrow," and I didn't. I watched all three at the same time. So it kind of really clung you to your chair, and it was quite nice to reminisce at how good we used to be. Unfortunately, we just haven't been that good for so long. But
I think a fundamental point, though, Callum, is how rubbish you were on the night when it mattered. And I think that was down to
absolutely,
nerves and anxiety and everything. This kind of myth that United played well and deserved to win, that's rubbish. We all sat there thinking, this is done and dusted, and we're going home. And I'm doing interviews with people saying we did so well throughout the season, but it wasn't good enough. And then suddenly that last 2 or 3 minutes changed everything.
Well, it's been years since I watched that game in full, and we were fairly woeful for 89 minutes. And then the 91st and 93rd minute was just euphoric, really. And Gary Neville always alludes to it, doesn't he? He says he just can't remember what happened. And I'm not surprised, just because it was like something just took over the team, and it was almost like destiny and fate, wasn't it, what happened?
It really was. And, I'm getting goosebumps now. And as I say, I'm not a United fan in any way, which way, but I am an admirer of the football club, and I'm an admirer of the things that make it special and unique. And that was typified by that one night. And I'll also always be annoyed that the United fans pretty much drank Barcelona dry. And I remember trying to find a beer about 3 a.m. and couldn't get it.
I feel like the Mancunians did well that night. Then, moving on from that as well, what would you say was your most shocking moment covering the club, whether that be a transfer story or?
I think the one thing that shocks you more than ever is probably when you get the hairdryer. I think that's the thing.
Have you had it a couple of times, Ferguson?
Yeah, I've had 2 or 3 times, and I think the last time was absolutely terrifying. Bearing in mind that there's another human being that's saying these things to you, and you really don't have any right of reply, especially when you have amazing respect for that person as a footballing figure. There is no one like Sir Alex Ferguson. I don't care what people say. He knew how to build a football club right from the bottom to the top. And what he was really good at, which other people aren't so good at, certainly in this day and age, is if he wasn't good at something, he recognised that he could bring people in who were better at him at other things. So he had really good coaches around him. He had people doing the things that he felt he couldn't do, and he could oversee that. And I think that was kind of brave and trusting. But yeah, to get the hairdryer, I mean, yeah, it's a medal of honour and it's great. And people say, wow. But when you're having it, I remember the last time.
It don't feel like that, yeah.
Right, you've got the guy's spittle all over your face, and as I say, you haven't got a right to reply. And I remember the last time it happened, I texted my wife and said, "I just had the hairdryer again. Give me 10 minutes, and I'll explain it." I was, you can't shed a tear or anything like that or show weakness, but blindly it rattles you.
Well, can you say what did you do to make him do
that? Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, shall I answer it or not? Yeah, I will answer it. It was a press conference, I think a Champions League press conference towards the end of the season. And it was after Gary Neville had been substituted at the Etihad and given the fingers to somebody. And that it was controversial like that. And I asked a question about Gary Cook, funnily enough, and he thought I was talking about Gary Neville. So there was a kind of disconnect during the press conference anyway. So I thought in my wisdom, having had a little bit of the hairdryer during the press conference, then that wasn't new or unique. I'd go and make amends and apologise because it wasn't what I was trying to do. So I found a quiet moment. He was outside Carrington, and I sort of stepped forward, and the hairdryer started, and I'm thinking, blimey, this is not pleasant. And then in the back of my mind, I thought I've got to do something about this. So I sort of said, "Look, hang on a moment. I've never treated you with anything but the greatest respect." And as the words came out, it's a bit like The Simpsons or something. You're thinking these words come out. I'm really brave. I'm really important. I'm great. Look at them. I'm fantastic. And it just made things 100 times worse. and it just went on and on and on. And I'll always remember looking to my left, and it was towards the end of the season when they allowed kind of VIP fans in, and they were all in Carrington. It was a quiet day, so they could all hear everything that was going on as well. So I just thought, well, I'll keep my counsel. I'll try and maintain my respect and just hope this comes to an end quickly.
Was he okay with you post that though? Was it a case?
Yeah, he's been okay. I think it's a difficult thing. I think he lives very much in the moment. It hasn't diminished my respect for the person as a manager. I just think he was incredible. And there probably isn't a week that goes by where somebody doesn't ask me about Sir Alex Ferguson, and I must have interviewed him hundreds of times. And he's the only person that can keep you right on edge, right on your toes. And back in the day, there were huge egos in that room covering Manchester United, and he managed like a school teacher to click his fingers almost and boss everything. And I think it would be great to think that Erik ten Hag had those in his armory as well, had those extra gears, but I just don't think he does.
Yeah, I mean, would you say that was probably your worst moment as well, or was there any, not worst moment, but was there any moments where the team was just quite deflated and it was quite hard to get a good interview?
Yeah, I mean, it's ups and downs. I mean, I always think about kind of Roy Keane. You didn't know whether you were going to get an F off from him or a good morning and hello, and generally, whichever it was entertaining and good. So I think he was great to interview. I enjoyed Ollie being Manchester United manager brilliantly, because I kind of got a relationship with him based on 1999, and realised he's a really intelligent human being, far more intelligent than the majority of footballers. So I was delighted to see him become Manchester United manager. And
Solskjaer's my absolute hero when it comes to United. He's up there with my favourite ever. So
completely, a really cerebral person who understood what it was to be obviously Manchester United manager, simply because he's died in the fabric of it. I think the only thing he probably was guilty of was just giving too much trust to people who didn't deserve that trust in that dressing room. I think having started really, really impressively and cracked the whip and got them all to wear their suits and be on time, that kind of eroded in that second season. I think that was his kind of downfall there. And kind of, why didn't you continue just giving them what they needed, which was discipline and leadership and guidance? Why did you let those kind of standards slip? That was really sad for me, because I thought he had some good people around him, some good coaches there, and I think that was kind of a missed opportunity.
Yeah, he's my absolute hero, and I'll never say a bad word about him. I certainly won't say a bad word about his management time, just because he got a lot of stick for it as well. But I actually think it was very underrated what he did. Third, second Europa final, semi-finals. I think he did a really good job considering the disarray in the club before him. It's just a shame we couldn't get to that next level, and I do question whether Ronaldo was the right time, but that's probably that's definitely a conversation.
I know that's a massive conversation, but all I think is it probably wasn't his decision either.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we probably said that wasn't the case, but I'd still argue it definitely was. But anyway, finishing there, James, obviously massive thanks for you to come on. I know you're obviously very busy. Have you got any projects coming up?
Just doing bits and pieces, really. I do some lecturing, which I really, really enjoy. Some event hosting. I have a podcast as well, looking at kind of the structure of sport from the kind of sporting director's part. So I'm just enjoying being able to say yes and no to things as they dictate. So it's been really, really nice, Callum, having a really good chat with you and wallowing in some of that nostalgia. But I think just hope that things are going the right way, that INEOS is right, that the club's on a positive trajectory, because my fear is that they've got so used to just being mediocre, being meh, that we're not going to get that kind of incredible trajectory that the club deserves. I think it will take time. But, as I say, I've said it about 3 or 4 times, I'm not a United fan, but you are part of something amazingly special. And I think what you want is people at the helm who realise what they're part of too. And hopefully you've got that.
Yeah, well, hopefully there's an upwards trajectory. Hopefully there's a bit of a change into the guard. And obviously I know there's talk of Pep potentially leaving City. Obviously Klopp's gone. So hopefully United can step into that and go back into where we rightfully belong, which is at the top. I'm sure many would disagree with that, but I know United fans would definitely say it is. But yeah, obviously massive thanks for having you on, James. It's been a pleasure. I've wanted to interview you for years and watched you for years. Your reporting, your journalism was absolutely brilliant. Always sort of top standard. So absolute pleasure to have you on. And I would
Callum, you're really kind. It's been fun. So thank you.
No problem at all. Make sure you check James's podcast out. Obviously, you know where to find me. Find me on Twitter, moaning about the current election. And make sure you check out the United Road as well. And there's more shows coming over the summer. I'm sure we'll be covering that team called England as well a little bit, among many other teams. And we'll go from there. But let's see. I'd say come on England, but with Southgate in charge, I highly doubt it. But we'll see. Thanks for watching, everybody.